Roaring Kitty roars again, along with GameStop shares, which have obviously rallied as he makes his first post in a few years. And I'm getting a lot of posts on Twitter about it as I've commented about some of the issues trading a big position like the one that we saw. We're going to talk about it today on Open Interest. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Open Mic. I'm Mike Coe, and today I am joined by a good friend, former longtime colleague, and more importantly than that, a former executive at Goldman Sachs who works specifically in risk and clearing. And he works, there's actually two sort of primary divisions on the clearing side at Goldman Sachs. There is, for those who know, you'll be familiar with these acronyms. There's GSCO and there is GSEC. GSEC, and I'll allow Andrew to clarify this if I have it incorrect. But GSEC, as far as I remember, is the former Spear, Leeds, Kellogg, which is also the division of Goldman Sachs that I cleared through when I was a floor-based market maker and options specialist. So first of all, Andrew, welcome to today's live stream. This should be an interesting one.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
GSEC is the former Spear Leeds, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there were two, it was two sort of sections of it. There was the GSEC clearing group, and then there was also the electronic and algorithmic trading group. So my experience was across both of those in electronic trading for equities, options, and futures.
So I thought it would be better to ask you these questions than and now I have on my screen right here, and I don't know whether we're able to share this screen. This is the one that shows Susquehanna's holdings. What prompted some of this conversation was that I saw a tweet earlier, and actually there's been a lot of stuff on this, but this tweet right here, if you can make it out, this thing, I don't know if I could blow that up, but this one that says breaking news, I'll read it. Breaking news, according to the most recent GME 13F filings, all of the top call option sellers combined do not have enough shares to satisfy the Roaring Kitty's 12 million shares currently in the money. Okay, so what we're talking about there, whoever put this post up, just a quick point I wanted to make about this, about 13Fs, and that is 13Fs are trailing, right? So if you're looking at I'm going to bring up some holders here. We'll just pick one out. Citadel seems to get plenty of play when people are talking about GameStop. Everyone seems to believe there's a big, or actually it looks like Susquehanna is right up here. But if you take a look over at my Bloomberg screen, over on the right-hand side, what you're going to notice is that the most recent SIG, by the way, is Susquehanna Investment Group, Susquehanna International Group, excuse me, that their most recent filings were on the 19th of April and the 31st of March. So yeah, I guess that's the first point, is that 13Fs are a little bit slow. But let's just ask some basic questions, because I have observed from a lot of the back and forth that there's a real misunderstanding about clearing. So one of the things I heard today, and Andrew, if you could give people some understanding of this, a comment that was made was, if Roaring Kitty exercises his calls, that the counterparties would have up to 35 days to deliver the shares. True or not true? And could you explain what the truth is?
Is definitely not true. Whoever said that must not be familiar with the way the options exercise and assignment process works. It is a randomized process to ensure equality. Someone will exercise that option. It will go to the OCC. They will then randomly pick which option holder on the other side will get that assignment. The brokerage house that is clearing with the OCC that holds that account, that customer account, will be notified, and they will then in turn notify that customer of the the assignment to their short option. So I'm not sure where the 30-day
I think I heard
thing came
35,
from.
which made absolutely no sense, but
No, the securities are settled in 2 days. They just recently moved to one day. What was it, last week? And the brokerage, that holds the account will let that client know of that assignment, and they'll be delivering out the shares or in the
and I
shares.
guess that's
Depending on
the important question also, which is what is the settlement of those shares? What's the timing on the settlement of those shares? So if I get assigned on a call option, at what point is that going to settle? The equity side.
it,
Options have always
yeah,
settled T+1, but it's now how
it's
long?
out T1 as of last week, as far as I know. I think they rolled that out. The T1 settlement was rolled out on May 27th. Was it?
Yeah. So prior to that, and
It
maybe
was
some
2 days,
people,
and
yeah,
prior to that, it was 3 days.
yeah. So, and it has been 3 days for as long as I can remember, right? It wasn't a period
Yeah.
longer than that. I don't think that it's been longer than 3 days in my professional career. Equity settlement. So let
Yeah.
me ask you the next question, which is how often in your professional experience, when you were watching trades clear and checking all of that every single day, how often did you have these so-called naked short situations where there was actually a failure to deliver when a call option was exercised or assigned? How often did you see that?
I wouldn't say that often. The clearing member is really where the buck stops. So they're the ones that need to come up with it, to the OCC, and then internally they handle whatever needs to be done as far as a call, or bringing in funds, or liquidating positions. It has been a bit of a long time, but I don't, I wouldn't say that was a common thing.
And a prolonged failure to settle on the equity
Um,
side.
there
What's
were
the worst you've ever
certainly,
seen?
I mean, there were some that that would go out 15, 30, 60 plus days. There were, I mean, it depended on the name, but we're talking about names that are very liquid, traded on listed exchanges. We're not talking about pink sheets here. We're not talking about stuff that's insanely hard to borrow. The typical settlement for those was on, they would settle on settlement date. There wouldn't be fails. There are always obviously extraneous circumstances, but those type of aged failures fails would be for really reserved for the unique situations, the hard to borrow stuff, the penny stocks, the things that are not the type of names that we're talking about here.
And a customer who was actually experiencing a failure to deliver to them, they have some recourse, right? What can they do?
There are, there are buy-ins that typically take place. I think there were some rules that were changed some years ago, right after the financial crisis, and it forces some brokers to do buy-ins on settlement date. I think the mechanics. It sounds to me like whoever is coming up with these weird tweets, that they have a very antiquated understanding of how the settlement process works, or maybe they're reading some outdated version of a financial textbook.
It would seem that some of this stuff has to be really outdated because I've been at this
Yeah.
a little while now, and some of the things that they're suggesting haven't been true for as long as I've been doing this, which dates back to the 90s, late 90s. So,
Yeah.
um, could it ever have been true? I don't know. Maybe when they actually used ticker tapes, it was true. I mean, I'm sure settlement wasn't that easy back then. I do know
No.
that there was I was not working in the business in the 1987 crash, but I have worked with people who did, and who were senior to me when I first started out, and they told a lot of stories about how trades they were still trying to sort out what happened on the Black Monday a week later,
Yeah.
and I have spoken to traders who told me that they were out of business on Black Monday, but the clearing and the settlement process was so slow and so behind that their clearing firms hadn't figured it out by the time they got an opportunity to trade their way out of it. I'm talking about some guys that were on the SIBO back, and this was before SPX options were really a thing. OEX was bigger at that time.
Hmm.
So a quick point for anybody who's watching. Um, if you have a question for Andrew, and I apologize for this typing because here's what's going on here. I mentioned this on Monday that I'm going to be traveling to a number of locations. So I'm trying to set up a kind of a portable setup so I can continue to do these live streams and hopefully get Andrew back on some of the future ones as well. But the byproduct of this is we're on a sort of a shoestring, Band-Aid and bubblegum kind of thing. And so consequently, it's making a lot of noise when I type, and so I apologize for all of that. But if you want to ask a question, a more specific question about clearing and things like that, then by all means, just put it into the live chat, and we will try to answer it. So I'm just going to throw up one of the comments. I wish I had 120,000 contracts, maybe not in GME, but anything at all. Hey, I'd be very happy to have those 120,000 contracts. I mean, I'll put it to you this way: I'd still do the live streams, but I wouldn't be doing much else. Live streams, and maybe hitting the beach and eating well and drinking wine. Because let's put some perspective on this. I've observed that, Andrew, you've probably seen this too, and we were talking about it before we went on. It's this weird tribalist thing that's going on. It's going on in politics. It's going on. You're either with me or you're against me. Everything is so binary, so black and white. There's this whole thing going on about us versus them and the pros. I really don't care what happens to GameStop share price. It really has no impact on me whatsoever. I haven't been a market maker in a number of years. I have no position in it. I don't intend to take one. Maybe I'll take a little one. One of us, actually, who's involved with this live stream, for what it's worth, in the interest of disclosure, I'm not going to disclose his name unless you get into my ear and say that it was long. It was long calls in GameStop, okay? So for everybody who's curious, and that was just a punt, right? Oh, look, it might be happening again. We might get a little bit of a rally here. You know who I'm talking about. May I mention your name, or do you want to keep it quiet for now? But you can get it in my ear and tell me. But look, we don't have an axe in this one way or the other. Okay, keep it quiet. I was told not to mention. But
Listen,
of everybody who's
I'll
involved,
fess up to it too. I took a flyer on some GameStop calls last month.
people can't help yourself. You're like, maybe they're going to pull this thing off again. So this whole idea that, you worked at Goldman Sachs. I was a former member of the Filings, the Amex, the NYMEX. I was self-clearing member at Cantor and have traded, I don't know, God knows how many millions of contracts over the years. That just because, I was the options principal and the head of equity derivatives at a tertiary investment bank on Wall Street, that somehow, therefore, I'm out to get people who are trading GameStop options on the long side. It's just dumb. It's just dumb. Anyway, I want to give some perspective to this tweet, this Black Mutt comment, though. just how big this options trade is. 120,000 contracts, 100 multiplier is 12 million shares. At 20 is $240 million worth of stock. And he paid 567, I think. I don't remember. I'm just going off of memory. 567 a contract, according to the post that I saw. So
Something
that
like
is
60
$68
something
million of premium. So here's a question. Goldman Sachs cleared some pretty big options traders over the years. You know, I'm just one workaday options trading journeyman as far as Wall Street is concerned. You know, there have been, you know, at any given time, there's probably hundreds of us. There have been thousands over the year. On the NYMEX, there was 1,000 seats. I was on one of them. I don't remember how many were on the MX and the Filix and so on. But how often, Andrew, did you ever see one trader make a directional bet using $68 million worth of premium, like a trade of this size? Have you ever seen it before?
In a single name security, that would have hit a lot of radar screens. I can tell you that it would have hit radar screens from a notional value standpoint, from a number of contract standpoint, from a single name concentration standpoint. You know, there would have been a lot of eyes on that trade and a lot of eyes on that position.
Do you ever remember seeing one that big in your professional career? Have you seen a trade that big?
In not in single names, I would say that would probably be some of the largest. From a notional standpoint, it would be in the top 5, top 10. Indices we saw, obviously, you know, those got pretty big notionally at times.
Yeah, I mean, well, so on the index side, you would see lots of contracts and chunky amounts. You know, people would say,
ETFs.
but it's also a risk thing. So let me put it to you this way. I would commonly trade, you know, 500,000 point SPX boxes to offset premium, you know. So you do that and you're trading 50 million shares, $50 million notionally at a time. But the risk of that trade was virtually nil. So, you know, the biggest positions I ever had, I'm trying to think, in a single stock. Tyco, maybe, pre-split, back in the early days of the multi-list. I think I moved, stock was about $110 and I traded, I think, shares did I trade that day? I think about 4 million. So I traded about 4 million at an average price of under 110 because the stock got hit. It was when the Prudent Bear Fund, David Tice in Dallas, hit it. Oh, good. We got some questions coming in. So, well, first of all, someone local. So for those of you who don't know, I'm in Marin County, California, just north of San Francisco. Steve Garcia. Hi, Mike, from San Rafael, California. I've heard several people say, including Sam Carson, that vol is well supplied. I presume that means volatility. What does it mean if volatility is well supplied? Would you agree with that, Andrew? It seems like there's a lot of premium sellers out there these days.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say in the single name, there's a lot of people trying to sell vol, and they're not.
And if you look
not always getting properly compensated for it, I would add.
No. You know very, very well, right? Andrew, for those who don't know, is very active recently, working at a family office that all they did was sell vol. Sold single stock vol like fiends. It was the only thing they would do. What do you think of that as a strategy, by the way?
It's tough to look at it generally as a strategy like that. You know, I think with any strategy, you need a sound risk management process in place, and you need to always sort of be ready to dynamically change with the market because it can change on a dime.
Okay, so we got first question. Where is that I think is interesting. So where is E-Trade going to find 12 million shares of GameStop to locate? Okay. So this question, so just I'm going to put this question to you, Andrew. So E-Trade is not the one that has to locate the stock, are they?
No. Nope.
And why is that?
Because pretty much anyone holding GameStop in a margin account has a hypothecation agreement in place, and those securities are being held in street name with the broker. And every broker out there that has positions in margin accounts for customers is able to lend those out and able to supply locate. So they don't have to source it internally at all. In fact, if you look at even like the fixed messaging protocol, there are fields to support any broker, from identifying a locate, and all the trading systems.
The fixed protocol, by the way, there are probably people who are watching this who are not institutional traders, so they may not know what the fixed protocol is. So FIX is an acronym. It's the Financial Information Exchange Protocol. It is an electronic protocol, and it is the way by which institutions communicate information about transactions. It's the principal way. It's not the only way. It's the principal way by which institutional market participants communicate transaction data with one another in real time. We refer to these as fixed connections. So if I had my order management system and execution management systems open when I was at Cantor Fitzgerald, for example, and some firms maintain their own fixed hubs. Others you can basically subscribe, but it's basically a way by which you can connect. And so I could fire an order in, and it has to go somewhere. So you have to have a way, you have to have an understanding about what certain fields mean, so that when you fill in certain fields and you send out an electronic message, that everybody knows what you're talking about. So that's what the protocol was all about. It was established many years ago when firms recognized they needed a way to communicate with each other. Going back to this question, though, about finding the locate on the 12 million shares, I want to make a different point about this, which is actually unrelated to locating the shares. The other reason that they don't need to do the locate is because E-Trade, in this case, is representing the customer, Roaring Kitty, who in theory you're saying is going to exercise their options. So when they exercise their options, remember the process that Andrew spoke of. So what happens? The Roaring Kitty notifies E-Trade that they are going to exercise their options. And then E-Trade notifies who, Andrew?
The OCC.
The OCC. And then you go to that process that Andrew described earlier. Now, the question is not whether E-Trade or any other broker can get a locate. It's whether or not the counterparty to those call options can deliver the shares, which they may in fact already, they have to deliver the shares. They may already hold them, right? And in fact, they very likely do hold them. Why is that? And I'm going to say, Andrew, these are 80 delta options. Actually, let's check. You know what? Let's look at the screens. Let's find out. But if these are 80 delta options, how much stock do the people who are short the calls probably hold already, that they don't even need to try to locate the other portion?
I'd say at least,
80% of it, right?
10 million, 9 million shares.
It's 80% of 12 million.
Yeah.
So they've already got 9.6 million shares to begin with. And it's probably more because, and I saw somebody else, hopefully I can find that. It's kind of a good one. I found somebody had said, these market makers, they just sold them naked. These guys, they really,
again, I think
I've been in the logs.
I hate to laugh. I mean, I'm not trying to, condescend on anyone or anything like that, but market makers are extremely sophisticated players in the market. they have systems in place, they have risk systems in place. The thought that they would be sitting on a naked position like that, um,
I,
it's
so let's put it to you a different way. For anybody who believes that that could happen for a second, leaving aside the fact that smaller market makers, most market makers are not self-clearing. And what does that mean?
yeah,
If you're not self-clearing, that means you have what's called a JBO agreement with Goldman or with JP Morgan or back in the day with Bear Stearns or whomever. First Stop, Spear, doesn't matter. The clearing firms aren't going to let you get away with that in the first place.
no.
You handled risk, right? What happens? What happens if I, a market maker with $100 million of excess regulatory capital who clears at Goldman Sachs, gets naked short 120,000 deep calls in a stock that's trading 200 vol? What happens?
Yeah.
You tell me.
I mean,
am I going to be hearing from you?
Yeah, you're going to be hearing from any risk.
What am I going to be hearing?
I mean, even the fact that it's just a stock like GameStop. I mean, that's going to go on a list, and any type of exposure, any large positions, long, short, naked, covered, whatever, it's all going to be on people's radars. I mean, any short squeeze candidates, they have predictive analytics now that are creating sort of hot risk reports. It's going to hit people's radar, and someone's going to get a phone call. But again, it doesn't even matter that someone from the broker is going to be reining it in. It just doesn't make any business sense for them to be sitting naked with a position like that. I mean, that's not their job, is to take flyers on direction of names. That's not the area that market makers fulfill in the marketplace. They don't take directional bets.
I mean, having done this for a living, the idea that I would just go out and someone would say, "Oh, how are you?" And this is so when I was on the floor as part of a crowd back in those days when we still did it that way, a broker would walk in, and this is how it would go down. The broker would say, "GameStop, June 20 calls how?" And the crowd would say something, and I'm going to base this actually on what the prices are, but I'm going to use what we would have said at the time. 5 3/8, 5 3/8 at 6, 1,000 up. If it was a big crowd, right? 1,000 up market would be a big crowd. The specialist might say that, or the whole market making crowd might say something like that. So 5 3/8 at 6. And the broker says, okay, 5/8 bid for 1,000. At 3/4, 5/8 top. So, okay, so 1,000 trade 5 5/8. Why did I say 5 5/8? Because that's actually how we traded originally, was in eighths, and then we went to what were called teenies, which were 16ths, and then they went down to nickels and pennies. He bought the 120,000 at an average price of 5.67, which is coincidentally very close to 5 5/8. So anyway, everyone then goes out and hedges whatever the delta is. You don't get to all of us, those market makers. We work for somebody else. There's somebody who manages us. That person reports to the principals of the firm. The principals are the guys whose capital it is, right? So the individual traders, the market makers, it's usually not their capital until they become the most senior guys at the firm. And the most senior guys at the firm are usually not down there punching it around in single stock market making anymore. So the proposition that the market makers are risking the principal's capital in an unfettered way is ludicrous. They would be tossed out of the building so fast. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Does it mean Ken Griffin couldn't do it if he wanted to? That Jeff Yaz couldn't do it if he wanted to? That Don Wilson couldn't do if he wanted to? That Mike Goodwin couldn't do it if he wanted to? All of these guys? Well, I mean, I suppose they could. They never would. But they didn't get to where they were by, oh yeah, this time we're going to take a flyer. I have managed my book like a bookie for 30 years, but this time, because it's Roaring Kitty, we're just going to go naked short. Yeah. That's just,
especially after the history, the track record with GameStop. I mean, it hit in 2021. It hit what did it peak at? Like $440 a share or something like that at one point, because of various runs. So it's not something that I think is an option for any market maker.
So White Tiger here is asking, if they fail to deliver, then wouldn't they have to deliver by T35? So I'll let Andrew opine on this in 1 second. So I'm going to actually just follow up on something I'd asked Andrew before, because only once in my professional life, and Goldman was the counterparty, by the way, Andrew, we didn't know each other at the time, but only once in my professional life did I exercise calls and get a fail to deliver. I exercised 500 deep calls, and the next day, or on settlement, which was T2 probably, at the time that this happened, the back office called me up and they said, hey, we only got 2,200. I said, what? Now, I was obligated to deliver the shares myself. So this is why this was important. It probably wouldn't have been anything otherwise. So I took in 2,200, but I owed 50,000 to the street. And it started coming in day after day, dribs and drabs. And the counterparty trader, who was a Goldman Sachs trader in London, he actually started calling us directly. And then I remember he said, I'm going to buy you in. I said, go ahead, buy me in. I don't care. It was okay because I was owed the stock myself. So I was not what we call short to the street. What does that mean? I mean, yes, I was supposed to deliver shares, but somebody was supposed to deliver shares to me. So if you buy me in, how does this work? Andrew, explain.
I mean, what's going to happen is the broker's just going to go out and buy the shares and then deliver them out.
But who's ultimately responsible for paying whatever that cost is?
The account holder at whatever price they get bought in at.
So the way it works is they follow the chain to whoever is actually naked short to the street. So if I owe 50,000, but I've only got 2,200, which is actually what had happened in this case. I deliver the 2,200. They're waiting for the other 47.8. And they say, okay, we're buying you in. And I say, okay, fine. Why do I not care? The reason I don't care is because they then say, okay, well, wait a minute. They can follow the thread. They're like, well, but this guy owes Mike. So, and then maybe that somebody owes that person. So the amazing thing is that in the particular case where I was dealing with it, the guy who I owed the shares to was the one who was short to the street. The whole reason he had gotten into the situation with the deep calls was because he was short to the street and he needed stock, and he somehow thought there was a magical way that he could get shares by trading, this is important, a conversion under parity. So what is a conversion? We got to talk about this because I mentioned this. So I didn't say the exacts when I was tweeting it out earlier, but I was keeping track of what we call RevCons. RevCons is an abbreviation, reversals, conversions. What does that mean? And I'm going to actually illustrate it. If we can pull it up on OptionPlay here, I'm just going to illustrate what that trade is. A reversal or a conversion is a trade where you swap common for synthetic stock. And it's a common way for options traders to borrow and lend shares to one another with a fixed point in time. So when you go and I could always borrow shares from I get somebody from a Cantor or a sec lending guy, Pete Bellino, and just say, hey, go borrow me 1 million shares XYZ. What do I have to pay? Or maybe I don't have to pay. If it's not hard to borrow, GC, good collateral, whatever. So what does this mean when we say a reversal and conversion? So a reversal and a conversion are the opposite sides of the same trade, and it is a swap between a synthetic long position and the actual common. And so I'm going to construct it for you right here, and we're going to use GameStop. And we're going to use the mid-market prices. And the mid-market prices are important here because actually, so if I wanted to convert, that means I'm going to short the stock synthetically, and I'm going to take in the common. So I'm buying the stock, and I'm going to sell, and then we can just pick some, preferably out of the money strike. So we'll just call it the 35. So I'm going to use the 35 call, and I'm going to use the 35 put. Now, this should be intuitive. Whatever way you're going in the stock is the opposite side of what you're going to do in the calls, and it's the same as what you do in the puts. This should make sense. Why is that? Oh, whoops, sorry. There we are. Okay, here we go. So I would, in this case, buy 100 shares of GameStop, sell one call at the August 35 call, and buy one August 35 put. So the August 35s is just a synthetic, because imagine this: you're short the 35 call and you're long the 35 put. If the stock is above 35, you're going to be short the stock at expiration because you're going to be called away. And if it's below 35, you're going to be short the stock at 35 because it's below 35, you're going to exercise your put. There is a little bit of pin risk associated with it if you carried it all the way, and then I'm long stock. This is a carry cost trade. It is a common thing. Traders will do it so that you can get net longer or net shorter the common to square off your position so you're not carrying all this excess stuff around as much as you can. And the GameStop June Repcons were trading between 2 and 6 cents. What does that mean? It means that traders were paying between 2 and 6 cents to borrow the shares, GameStop shares, all the way through June expiration. Delivery is not a problem.
It's not a high premium at all.
It's bupkis. It's nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, you could call any SEC lending desk on the street. Yeah, they could get you 1 million shares. Now, that could change. It can change from one day to the next. I've seen things go from no issue, GEC, to impossible to borrow overnight. It happened to me on one of the biggest trades I ever did in UNG when the U.S. Natural Gas Fund could no longer create new shares, and that was because they tapped out. It was a dynamic I didn't fully realize. I didn't know that they were subject to the same position limits on the NYMEX at the time. But anyway, let's see what else we've got here. So again, this was do they have to deliver? So look, if you don't deliver, the counterparty always has the option to buy you in anyway.
Yeah.
So they could force you to deliver before 35 anyway, because they just buy you in. That means they buy the stock.
It's not going to get to T35.
No, it never will.
In a name like this, it just won't. So I think that there's whatever chatter is going around with this T35 timeline. I mean, realistically, it's just not going to get there.
Yeah. Here we have another former floor guy, Wesley Yee, Pacific Exchange guy, said that they were doing paper trade matches. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, even when I first started in the business, broker would come in and you'd actually staple the buy and sell tickets together. I mean, how ridiculous is that? It was ridiculous even when we were doing it. I mean, we had the internet by that time, so the idea that you were actually writing trades on paper tickets and stapling them together was pretty silly. But okay, here's a question: is Friday 5 p.m. the cutoff time for exercising options? Why different brokerages have different automatic exercise and assignment rules within 1 cent when OCC has random assignments?
It's two separate things. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
So auto exercise occurs on expiration, and the 1 cent rule is what the OCC applies to determine, based on the settlement price, the closing price on expiration, what options are officially in the money and out of the money, and that's different from the early exercise. The random assignment occurs when I, as a holder of an option, of a long option, decide to exercise that in the money option I notify my broker, which notifies the OCC. OCC then randomly assigns it
Really good question
to
coming up
a
here.
short holder.
Hmm.
So that so it's two separate separate mechanisms that we're talking about.
Yeah, here's a good question, and it's one that I think is important. Unfortunately, I would love to stay on and talk. I could talk about this until the sun rises tomorrow. It's just so funny to me. I mean, I love this stuff.
I could answer this one if you want. The one with the
Yeah, well,
E-Trade.
go ahead. You give your you and I haven't discussed it, but you go ahead and give your answer. Then I'll say what I
The
have to say. But I'm
the
curious to hear
the
what you have to
juice
say.
the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Is
Yes.
essentially what it boils down to. They have E-Trade is by and large a regulated entity, and it has regulatory responsibilities. They don't want to be caught up in any sort of legal issues or SEC investigations or anything like that. So the amount of commissions that they're making off of, even though this is a really large position and this guy has a large account, the amount of commissions that they're making off of him just isn't worth the headache that he could create for them. So, if there's any sort of chatter about them potentially kicking him off his platform or whatever, it's because they don't want, the baggage that might come along with him. It's not because of some, vast conspiracy theory to silence him and shut him down.
Yeah, I mean, here's a way to think about it differently, completely unrelated to this. You own a rental house, okay? You have a beach house. You rent it out. It's like an Airbnb thing, and you get good rent for this. You know, it's right on the beach, and people pay you $25,000 a week to rent your house, right? And you like it. It's been it was in your family forever. You inherited the thing, and now you're getting some extra income. So somebody comes along and says, "Hey, I want to rent your house for, call it 3 months, right? And I'll pay you, your going rate." And you're like, "That's awesome. That's great." And so the guy comes in, and the next thing you know, this guy has got rock bands performing on the beach in front of your place, and those people are all using your house. You don't have insurance for this. You're not, this is not a liability you were at all prepared to take. You thought you were renting your beach house for somebody to do beachy type of stuff, not to turn it into some kind of party palace. It's
Yeah,
a very different risk dynamic. And if you have any questions about how different the risk dynamic is, consider the fact that Massachusetts state regulators, the SEC, I mean, everybody's looking at this. Everybody's talking about this. So you're sitting here, I mean, if you're E-Trade, you're thinking, I don't want any part of this, right? I don't
yeah,
need this headache. This is whatever you're giving me, I'm going to burn up in one day of legal fees dealing with whatever shit show comes up now. It's going to chew up whatever you pay me. We don't want it. Whatever you're doing, I don't know if imagine Inside. There was a line in the movie Casino, where all of the capos are hanging around the table. They're literally, they go into a side room. They're in court. They've got their oxygen going into their nose or whatever, and they're debating about whether they're going to knock people off or not. And you know, each one's like, he's a good guy, and it goes all the way around. And then they're like, Remo, what do you think? He's like, why take a chance? Why
yeah,
take a chance? For $120,000 in commissions, this thing is all news. They're going to take a chance. The guys at E-Trade are like, I'm not losing my job over this. That 120,000, it's not like I get to keep the money. We're a big firm.
yeah.
Screw it. Don't want anything to do with it. That's the reason. It's pretty obvious. And I get it, man. I fully get it. I wouldn't want anything to do with it either. Just had a question about Archegos. So White Tiger. First of all, anybody who's joining this for the first time, if you can't tell that I love talking about this kind of stuff, I mean, it's not, normally it's about, what's going on in the markets, do we have any good trade ideas, this, that. I'd love to talk about those things too. But this is all very interesting. But that alarm that goes off is because I know, I got to go. So with that, thanks for watching. Sorry I had to cut it off. I got to go on CNBC now.